All right, so the HIWU sheriff is in town recently. We've had a couple of major suspensions. The first one, and I think the more noteworthy one, is Robertino Diodoro is provisionally suspended by the Horse Racing Integrity and Welfare Unit for alleged possession of the banned substance levothyroxine or thyroxine, which is a thyroid medication. So, I mean, this is not a failed drug test. Was basically an investigation, a barn raid, whatever you want to call it, and they found the drug in his possession. I mean, this is, to me, obviously I don't want to say anything definitive because I've never been in Robertino Diodoro's barn. I've never seen him treat a horse. But just from a handicapper's perspective, this was one of the guys I noticed last summer when HIWU first came into effect, whose winning percentage dropped. And it had bounced back up in 2024. He's having a strong meet at Oaklawn. But I had noticed a lot of his horses at Saratoga were not running the way they usually run, especially off of the claim. And this is a guy that a lot of people have had whispers and had suspicions about for a long time. And I think it'd be interesting to see what the industry reaction to this is, because when a guy like Rusty Arnold gets popped, everybody rushes to his defense. And I think with good reason, like he's been in the game for decades and has a very good reputation. I'm curious if there's going to be the same kind of rush to defend Robertino Diodoro. I haven't really seen that, and I think that kind of speaks volumes that there hasn't been a huge industry outcry in defense of this dude. He's a guy who operates mainly in claiming races, but has gotten some better stock over the years, has gotten some higher priced auction buys, has won some big races, but just being fair, calling a spade, this is not a surprising suspension to me. We'll see how it all works out and how it gets adjudicated. But John, this is one of the guys that, if we had to write a list of people we had suspicions of in 2023, he would have been on that list, at least for me.
Joe, I am shocked, appalled, and surprised. Said nobody in the horse business about this situation.
I know.
This is a guy who, when we wrote our list way back when Jason Service and Jorge Navarro were getting investigated, I know internally we wrote a list down, and he was definitely one of the top 10, 15 people that was on that list. And it's amazing to me, like when trainers who the bettors know are doing something. Okay. And the horses are running and claiming races and stuff like that. The industry as a whole in the past, the industry as a whole kind of looked the other way, and they were like, that's fine. It's a claiming race. Who cares? Except for the bettors and the people running in the claiming races. But once these guys who may or may not be using things, but are winning at a much higher percentage than the training abilities, show, start creeping into the claim, going from the claiming races, graduating to allowance races, then graduating to stake races. All of a sudden, then people get their backs up and start looking into them, or start, rightfully so. Diodoro was one of those guys. He was one of those guys where he was winning at I'm looking at the numbers now. It was 23%, 26%, 26%, 25%, 25%, 16, it's going to be 23%. And then that's all the way through, basically winning one out of every 4 races he was entering in from 2013 all the way to the present. That's not necessarily something that you would expect to see. His horses had a tendency to what we call rebreak, which is really a fallacy in itself, but that's a whole other story. But basically his horses continually ran further than they had done in the past or previous to coming into his barn. So I am so happy to see that some of these trainers that we had suspicions about are starting to get their due, and starting to get their time off, their vacation time, their suspended time. And tip of the cap to HIWU, because I know that one of the things that Lisa Lazarus and her team said time and time again when they were first entering the industry is that it wasn't just drug testing they were focusing on; it was also the investigative part. And I think it was that combination that ultimately is bringing Diodoro to serve his time. And there was another guy, Joe Lorenzo Ruiz, who isn't as well known here on the East Coast, but is certainly well known in the West Coast. And he is suspended 6 to up to 7 years. I'm not even going to try to name the name of the medication that he was allegedly using. But another guy who got a 6 to 7 year ban handed down for the ban using the banned substance for three positive tests for banned substances and aggravating circumstances. He got an additional year for that. So it was 2 years for each of the 3 times his horses tested positive, and then 1 year for quote unquote aggravating circumstances that he got the extra year for. He's getting fined close to $100,000. And basically he brought it to arbitration, and the arbiter penalized him that additional year for, like I said, aggravated circumstances. So again, I am glad to see that Lisa Lazarus and her team are cleaning up the sport, in a methodical way. Would we all like to see it faster? Absolutely. But I know, and in this world that we're in that is so litigious and constantly wants to fight back when they know that they're guilty in certain cases, that that HIWU has to go through the process and make sure they have an overabundance amount of evidence to make sure that these guys go away and never come back. I read an interesting tweet, and take it for what it's worth, saying, "Hey, how could you do that? This guy was a hardworking trainer, and he was an outrider when you caught him, and how is he supposed to feed his family?" Well, you know what? Don't fucking cheat if you want to try to feed your family. And if it says that you aren't allowed on the racetrack, even as an outrider, then you're not allowed on the racetrack. There's a lot of other places to get a job outside the racetrack when they say you can't come here.
Yeah, the thing is, like, there's been a lot of rancor around, like, some of the HIWU suspensions, which I get, because there are some people maybe who have been innocent along the way and have gotten ensnared in something that's like just kind of a therapeutic overage or, an oversight or something like that. But that's kind of what you have to put up with along the way if you're going to get these big fish. Like, they're not going to get it right all the time. And I agree, like, in terms of, like, upending people's lives, like, we have to be as sensitive as possible, and we have to have as much support for them as possible to be able to defend themselves. And I think that's something that's been done better over time, with HIWU having basically a pro bono legal committee that you can go to when you want to fight the case. But, for all the negative headlines and all the people, like, railing about how this is, the destruction of the sport and blah, 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 a lot of crickets right now from those same people when a guy like Robertino Diodoro gets busted. So you can't have it both ways. Right. You can't complain and cry every time someone that you personally like might get tripped up along this, and then still be happy that they're getting the major cheaters allegedly out of your way. Like, it's a process. It's not going to be perfect, but in what other circumstance would we have had this kind of headline? Robertino Diodoro was suspended for the first 2 weeks of the Oaklawn meet because of a positive test from last meet. That would have been the end of it. Like, these guys, and that's the thing we complained about for a long time. These guys can just get their 7-day or 14-day suspensions and their $500 fines forever. It's never going to change the way that they do business until you come in and you pop them for a lengthy amount of time. Then maybe you start to get a culture change.
Joe, I know you're an analyst and you like to look at the racing form and the sheets and really go through the numbers. I'm going to throw some numbers at you that are really going to impress you. They're non-racing. They have everything to do with our podcast, our fledgling podcast, which is strengthening and improving every week to the point where we are right now with 37 shows under our belt. Hold on to your seat, Joe. You ready? After 37 shows, a mere 37 shows, we have surpassed over 1 million YouTube views. That's 1 million. That's one with 6 zeros after it, if you can imagine. Now,
that's why you're an accountant.
That's why I'm the numbers guy. So, yep. Now, just as a comparison, do you know how many shows it took to get to that point at the previous one?
I'll say 60.
You're close. It still hasn't happened. It didn't happen in our lifetime. That's the important thing. Okay. 1 million YouTube views. We have over 4,500 subscribers already. Now, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't subscribe. And I know, Joe, you like to do the subscribe here or anything. So please subscribe. But the majority of the 4,500 subscribers are industry insiders. They listen to what we have to say. We've increased our monthly fan base month over month from the beginning, 9 months ago. We unmasked the elusive Tinky, and that his shows averaged over 50,000 views, each time. And then finally, Joe, I don't know if you realize this, but this little podcast, we are poised to be the most widely streamed podcast in the entire thoroughbred industry. I would say the over-under is probably like 5 more shows, and we will be the most widely streamed podcast in this industry. So I have a tendency to compliment myself. Joe, thank you. Thank you for being my partner on this, my co-pilot, and really the driving force to doing Rail Talk podcast. And again, also thank you to our sponsors for jumping in with us and trusting that we're going to be a success. I don't think that any of them even thought we were going to be this amount of success this quickly. So thank you to Phasic and the Green Group, and of course, TaylorMade. Incidentally, I got a nice note from Mark Taylor after we sent them these numbers saying, you guys are the TaylorMade of industry podcasts.
That's the highest compliment there is. Yeah, no, it's been so exciting, and I want to shout out to people who stop us at like OBS or at the racetrack or something and say how much they enjoy the show. That's a big part of it. Is just being out in the world and hearing that feedback. So we're very appreciative of all the fans and everybody who watches and reaches out to give us some encouragement or even some constructive criticism. But yeah, it's been a team effort. It's been great. It's been our vision from the jump. Me, you, John, and our producer, Patty Wolf, of course, and our excellent associate producers. We could not do the show without Anthony LaRocca, Aaliyah LaRocca, Nathan Wilkinson, and Julia Agresta. It's a team effort. I love working with you guys. I'm so proud of the growth of the show. I'm so proud of the impact that I think we're making more and more as time goes on. As you said, it's evident when guys like Tinky want to come on and do their reveal on our show. I think that's because they appreciate the conversations. Tinky appreciates the conversations that we're having. And I love it. I love getting on this mic with you every week, and it always feels better. It always feels like a little bit of family therapy. We laugh, we cry, we crack jokes on each other, and we hope that comes across. So yeah, continued growth for Rail Talk and the Rail Talk Nation. We'll see you next week. Might have a special show next week. We won't kiss and tell just yet, but there might be a special show in the works for next week's episode of Rail Talk. So we see you then back here on Rail Talk.